so excited to be chatting with you, obviously, about such an important conversation and obviously celebrating the conversation as well. I want to give you a heads up. So I literally live downtown, like Civic Center in one of those high rises in San Francisco. And so protests have been going all day, all night. If you hear noise, it's literally the protest outside because I'm a half a block away from it. I think, though, that we're obviously in a really crazy time, to say the least, for so many reasons. And while this conversation is going to focus on celebrating where our community, the LGBTQ plus community, where we've come to this point, but it's also going to be about how hard it was to get to this point, and really equally important, like the work we have to continue to do to move past those points. And I think there's a lot of communities right now that are also hurting. And I think that noise outside, if it does come into our conversation, I think it should just serve as a reminder that it's not just our community that was and is hurting. There's a lot of communities right now hurting, and we need to come together and we need to support those communities.
100%. First, I hope you stay safe, where you are. And I'm glad that you brought that up. I think that will be a poignant conversation, or part of the conversation today, right? Part of our community and the wider ones that we're all a part of.
Yep.
And impacted by.
For sure. So Julie, that actually brings me to my first question for you. What does a safe and inclusive LGBTQ plus work environment look like to you?
Yeah, I think it's a great question and a relevant one. I actually think that wider than the LGBT community question around safety and inclusivity, it's especially in the workplace, it's more about intersectionality, right? Because if we're just talking about LGBT, then we're missing a ton of what diversity and inclusion and safety looks like for everyone else, right? And so when we talk about the women's movement, we talk about the Black movement, we talk about, LGBT movement, that we're then leaving what safety means for other people that we care about. And so I think that safety includes having people around you that come from similar backgrounds, that look like you, that sound like you, that there's not a homogeneous surrounding, right? There's also safety in being able to be who you are. Part of the LGBT community is being able to express yourself, right? And being able to talk about your struggles and who your family is and your friends are. There was a time in even my life, in our generation, where it wasn't okay to come and talk about that you had a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or that you wanted to marry a woman, or you wanted to marry whoever you wanted to marry. So I think that we've made tremendous progress, but safety and being able to express yourself and able to talk about, and then having people around you who can relate to your experience is incredibly important to that safety and inclusivity in the workplace.
100%. You literally touched on so many important topics of what really safety looks like. I'm curious, like your experience at Gong, obviously you've been at Gong now for over a year. My sort of perception of you is that you always were Julie, you always had your wife, Katie, right? Mm-hmm. I'm curious, it never felt like you were hiding your true self. And I've had a similar experience myself at Gong, where I don't feel like I've ever had to hide Eric. Whereas in these, I definitely have, I can't hide, but I've tried to tone down, if you will.
Totally.
What's your experience at Gong been like coming out? And when I say coming out, I mean, you've still had to have those conversations that this is my wife, Katie, right? What has that experience been like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that similar to you, I feel I can't hide. I will say that for me, I very much recognize, one, my privilege in a lot of ways, that I can show up as a straight woman and a straight white woman if I need to. I choose not to at this stage in my life. And one thing I do is I come out in my introductory email to say, basically, like, my wife, right? Like, I make a statement coming in the door, and I have felt not 1 ounce of a question or a hesitancy or oh, what's that about? That there was a total normalcy of just like, oh, here's this woman and here's who she is. And that is so beautiful, right? That we are just accepted for who we are, and that isn't weird. It isn't something to be like, oh, well, tell me about that. It just is, you know, and we all just want to be treated as human beings, and accepted for who we are. And I've felt that from the moment I walked in the door at Gong, which has been a really beautiful experience. And now my wife provides workouts 2 times a week for Gong, and like people have their own relationships with my wife at Gong. And so it's kind of next level, right? To your point, that has not always been the case in life. And so what a beautiful and amazing experience to get to experience that with Gong and in my present life, for sure.
It just makes my heart so happy. I'm curious, you started to say that, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to speak for you, but you were saying that more or less, I think you have the option kind of being a white straight woman. When you say that, are you meaning that you don't necessarily stereotypically look like the lesbian, right? Is that what we're sort of hinting on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you make a good point that there's a lot of stereotypes out there and around physicality. And, you know, when I asked, my parents had a different view of what lesbians looked like in their growing up. They might have thought they all wear flannels. They're all very butch or masculine. They're all, you know, this different idea.
You guys all have cats, right? And you move into 3 dates. That's what I hear. That's what I hear on the street.
We're going to get into the stereotype conversation for sure, because I want to go there. And I think we're starting to evolve there. But yeah, I think that's exactly what I mean. For example, Katie and I have traveled around the world, and we've traveled to places where it was not legal to be gay, or maybe it was legal, but it wasn't okay. That I've had experiences where I've had to go back into the closet, close the door, right? And we came out and evolved in that country as friends. And we had to have a conversation about what that looked like in public. And Katie has short hair, and she's also very feminine. Hopefully she'll make an appearance. But, you know, just having long hair and looking a little bit more feminine, that if I really needed to show up as a perceived straight woman for my own safety, I've had to do that in the past. You know, and that faces its own struggles and challenges, right? But yes, you pointed that out. That is definitely what I mean.
Yeah, interesting, and thank you for sharing that. Like, it definitely, I don't think I have the luxury of coming off as straight, but I've definitely been in travel situations myself where, again, I put on a hat and I wear board shorts that I would typically never wear, you know, if I felt safe in a different country or whatever, you know, like my swimsuit in Spain is not going to be my swimsuit in maybe Croatia, right? And it is weird to still feel like I'm going back in the closet a little bit, like I'm having to change myself, even if it's just board shorts that I don't want to wear, that I choose to wear for that hopeful added sense of safety and protection. It does feel weird to have to sort of close that door again. Question, since we just sort of touched on like stereotypes, what is your biggest pet peeve when it comes to our community?
Yeah, around stereotypes specifically. One, I drive a Subaru. I have Birkenstocks. I have flannels. We want a cat, but we haven't gotten a cat. You know, there's all these stereotypes that I 100% fit into. And so I laugh at that and embrace it. And also, I made myself a promise when I was like 18. I was like, I will never drive a station wagon. I'll never have Birkenstocks, and flannels aren't for me. And now that's like who I am 1,000%. So one, I embrace some of the stereotypes. And then two, just what you said, I think really is a pet peeve of mine around stereotypes, that they can be funny and fun, and they also can be dangerous and serious. And that the whole thought process behind having to leave your door and make decisions about how you dress, you've put in so much thought and energy around the environment you're going to be in and making choices for your physical, mental, and emotional safety. That's a ton to go into just leaving the house. Absolutely. Right? And so those stereotypes can be dangerous because you're already thinking about what board shorts can I wear that I'm not going to be harassed or physically in danger or any of those things. And so that is the pet peeve, that's not thought about when there's a joke that you just don't know who is sensitive about that. You don't know who can joke about it or what they feel comfortable around, because we don't know their experience or what they've had to deal with their whole lives. You know what I mean?
It's so true. And just to even take it one step further, the people team at Gong just had a unconscious bias training, and you started to touch on it, but like, sure, some stereotypes are kind of funny, right? But a lot of them are actually really, really dangerous and really hurtful. And a lot of them are also very unconscious. And so how that does affect you as an individual, how comfortable you feel being your true self. Like, there's just so much to unpack there. So true, so true. Okay, last question, because I know you and Katie are gonna have a dance off. But I have to ask, like, obviously there's so many incredible things, right, about our community, right? As I said earlier, we have so much more work to do, but at the same time we've come so far. And again, not to say we don't have a lot further to go. And obviously, let's call it out, we're in San Francisco, which is a bubble within, a bubble of California, within, another bubble of the United States, if you will. And there's a lot of other people that are really just struggling, and don't have maybe the same privilege. I think you said earlier, I think that's a great word, the same sort of privilege that we have. Not to say that it makes it easy, right? Our struggles.
Yeah.
But there is some type of privilege that we get to experience that others don't. I'm curious, like, with struggles, what was top 2, top 3 struggles for you in coming out and finally being who you are, or transitioning into those Birkenstocks and getting a cat with Katie? Like, what were the struggles that you had to go through that finally got you to who you are and where you are today?
Yeah. I think to take it back, although I was not raised in a religious home, I chose religion as a young person. Though I had a girlfriend when I was 15 to 18 years old, 3 years, first relationship, but we were not out, right? I took a leap of faith when I was 18. I was dating a boy, and I said, listen, this was a part of my past, but I want to be open and honest so that we're not basing our relationship on lies. And I shared with him that I had a girlfriend. And I also worked with his mother, and we also went to church together, and his best friend was now my best friend. She still is. And I shared this with him in confidence that we could build trust, but I hadn't come out yet. And I was outed at church and no longer could go to church. I was outed at work, kept my job, but now everyone at work who was also pretty religious knew this thing, right? And so it had broken my world apart. So when we talk about struggle, it's like all around you now, you're forced to do this thing or recognize this truth. That was the moment that I got to decide if I was going to embrace that moment or let it totally ruin me. And the struggle was that decision of what I was going to do. And I've always been myself, and it was time, and got to have a great moment of, I'm never going to show up in a space and not be myself anymore. So I'm so grateful for that person actually outing me, though it was hard. It forced me to make that decision to show up every day as myself so that I wouldn't have to be faced with that, like, oh my gosh, everyone feels like I've lied to them, blah, 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 blah. And being in the workspace, especially, being able to show up who you are and not have to be faced with that kind of struggle is beyond crucial, right? Being able to make a living, make money, be who you are, and feel safe all in one means so much, right? So having gone through experiences, I'm sure you have as well, to show up in the workplace and not feel that, to now being, a grown woman who can show up as herself and not have to worry about it. I feel so blessed. And part of that is being in our bubble, unfortunately. Like, some of us don't leave our bubble for that reason, and that's unfortunate, but I feel very blessed to be in a place and with people around me and coworkers who don't even bat an eye about who we are, and glitter beards and fun-loving personalities. Like, this is who we are. And I think that that's a beautiful thing.
I literally, like, you're making me a little emotional. Like, it's a very beautiful thing. I don't know if I ever told you, but I was actually the Bible study president of my high school. I was the person
Youth group.
like the solo.
Wow.
Yeah, so I definitely have had certain encounters with maybe individuals who aren't quite as supportive as I choose to have in my life now. Love it. My last question, and then we have to dance it off. Okay. Last question.
Okay.
You mentioned workplace, right? And obviously, Gong is just a special place for us for a lot of these reasons that we've discussed, right? Yeah. But if you had to give any advice to a candidate, right, that wanted to maybe experience the same wholeness of self that we get to experience every day, like what's some advice that you would potentially give to a candidate that wasn't interviewing for Gong, that was maybe interviewing at other companies and unsure as to if they were going to bring their whole self or not to work every day? Like, what would the advice be during their candidate journey to like test out for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think inherently maybe it's just been so many years, like you kind of were like, this is who I am. What do you mean? I think that reviewing your own talk tracks as you're preparing for interviews, as you're preparing for those phone calls, doing some self-reflection if you are masking something. Is that something you would say, or you think that's something they want to hear you say? If there's aspects about, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. I see no issue in asking somebody about who they are and what they believe in and how they manage. Asking people how they run the organization and run a team, it's going to give you a lot of indicators about how they show up for people and what that means. So I think that part of the interview process and part of showing up as a candidate to find out about your whole self is asking more personal questions about how people deal with things, to give you an idea if it's okay if you show up who you are every day in that organization. Asking if you can speak to other folks in the organization to get their buy-in on that as well is important. And so I think that it's self-reflection as well as not being afraid to be bold and ask more personal questions about how people are at the organization, how they deal with hard situations, how they manage things.
I literally nothing to add to that except let's cheers.
Cheers.
I care so much about you. You are so special, Julie. Thank you.
You're amazing, Eric. Thank you for having me.
Your time. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your insights and just your shared experience. It goes without saying, we at Gong are sending all of our love, all of our thoughts, all of our best wishes of protection to everybody out there right now that is struggling in whatever capacity or community that might be. Thoughts on bringing Katie in for a dance off just to finish out our time?
Yeah, let me see if I can grab her really quick.
Okay, I'll just start dancing by myself until then.
Okay, I'm gonna try to come back in with her there. 1 second.